I want to approach our readings this weekend from three directions. The first one is a family dinner. The second one is listening. And the last one is the sign of peace. So first, family dinner. I don't know about your families, but in our family, even when we were little, family dinners were hugely important. It's really where we gathered together. It's where we caught up with each other and connected and bonded. My family, maybe like some of yours, doesn't necessarily all hold the same ideas. In fact, in my family, we don't all practice our faith the same way. Some of us don't practice our faith very much at all. We also come from very different political views. In fact, sometimes our family dinners could get a little heated and full of conflict. And so one year before Thanksgiving, Mom sent out an edict by email declaring that there would be no discussion of politics or religion at our family dinner. I had to, of course, appeal that decision because everybody else gets to talk about work. So she made a slight modification that I could talk about the things I do, but not religion as a whole. I could live with that. But you know, the challenge of being a family is, of course, we're not all alike. We may come from the same parents, but that doesn't mean that we all are exactly the same. And yet, family unity is still possible. That's probably one of the greatest values our parents held up for us, was that gathering together in unity, gathering together in love was possible even though we were all very different from each other. And they held that value out for us and challenged us to draw together even when we didn't necessarily agree with each other, and sometimes when we didn't even like each other. We still gathered together around our table. And that's important because we are a family together. The Catholic Church throughout the world is a family together. And this week we are approaching a very divisive time. I'm not going to ask any of you to raise your hands, but I have a feeling that within our congregation we have both Democrats and Republicans. I'm just guessing. And I would be willing to bet that within our parish family we have a diversity of views. But the thing that we're going to do today is we're going to stand up and we're going to say the creed together. And we're going to say, I believe. We're all going to say it together because there is unity in diversity. It doesn't mean uniformity, but it does mean unity. And it means that when we're looking at each other across the aisle, we need to remember that we are part of the same family. And so it is okay to disagree. It is okay to have different views. It is not okay to hate. That is not part of our identity. And that's what leads us to listening. You know, the first reading today, Moses is preparing the Israelites to enter into the promised land, and he's reminding them of what their source of unity is. Their source of unity is not that they're going to share this common land together. That's not really the source of unity. The source of unity is their belief in God, their common profession of Yahweh as their God. And he uses a word. In fact, it's a word that stuck with the people so much that they even made ornaments out of it. It's called the Shema. Shema Yisrael. Hear, O Israel. Now, recently I led a group of people on a pilgrimage through Italy. We had an amazing tour guide. She was awesome. And every time she needed to share important information with us, she would get on the microphone on the bus and she'd say, "Can you hear me?" And of course, everybody would say, "Yes." And then she would pause and she'd say, "Are you listening?" Very different. Hearing is a physical function of our ears. Listening is an intentional choice. And so when Moses says to the people, Shema Yisrael, he doesn't just want to make sure their ears are working. He wants to be sure that they understand that the Lord is our God. Now, things can get confusing. Sometimes we get confused about where our salvation comes from. I will tell you, our salvation will not come from the Democratic Party. Our salvation will not come from the Republican Party. Our salvation will not come from any political party. Our salvation will come from God alone. And so if we're placing emphasis on politics that only God can provide for us, we need to be aware. We need to listen, not just hear, but we need to listen to the words in the first reading. Hear that God alone is our God. The Lord is our God. Now, there are other important issues, and I don't want to diminish all of the important issues that exist today, but none of them are more important than the dignity of each human person. And we cannot sacrifice the dignity of one single human person in order to accomplish a political goal. God will never be pleased with that. And that's why our divisions are a problem. And that's why the church in her wisdom designed its liturgy with the sign of peace right before communion. And the reason why the sign of peace comes before communion goes right to when Jesus said, if you come to the altar and recall that you have a disagreement with your brother or sister, leave your gift, go and be reconciled, and then come and make your offering. Well, the church, in offering the sign of peace, is doing a couple of things. It's helping us to recall the first day of the resurrection, when Jesus walked through a locked door to where the disciples were gathered in fear, and he said to them, peace be with you. And in saying, peace be with you, what he was doing was teaching us how to pray for peace. Because in the sign of peace, the church prays for peace and unity for itself and for all humankind. And we call it the sign of peace because it's a physical gesture. Then we turn to our extreme left and we say to Kamala Harris, peace be with you. And then we turn to our extreme right and we say to Donald Trump, peace be with you. Now, you may think that's impossible, but the reason why it's possible is because we're offering the sign of the church and Christ's peace. This is not an interpersonal reaction. This is not some, hi, how are you? This is a sign of the peace of Christ, because Christ can walk through the locked doors of our hearts in order to offer us his peace. Christ can show us that he refuses to honor our divisions and that our divisions dishonor him. That doesn't mean we don't have values. It doesn't mean there aren't important issues, but it does mean that the dignity of the human person requires us to love one another. And peace is a fruit of that love. And so if we're concerned about the peace of our country, if we're concerned about the fracturing of our nation, then we need to hear the gospel reading today that the two greatest commandments are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our mind, and all our soul, and to love our neighbor as ourself. Nowhere in there does it say agree with your neighbor, but it does say love your neighbor as yourself. Now we have an opportunity to give a witness to the world around us, because from the very beginning of Christianity, the pagan community around the Christians looked at them and said, see how they love one another. We can witness that in our world today. We can be a sign of Christ's peace, and we can do it because we believe that the two greatest commandments are to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves.